Yo, what is up guys, Grim here, and in today's video I'm going to take you guys through my league start plans and of course my league starter build as well, because a lot of people have been asking for it, and I've got some PoEs ready for you. It's by no means a guide, but you can follow along if you want. If you're an experienced player, you should be able to probably make the most of it, and it should be pretty good. So let's get into it. So, in the background here, you're seeing the build which I plan to play, which is Freezing Pulse Ice Spear Totems. We'll get more into that in a second though. Let's cover off my league start plans. So I'm going to be playing with two of my friends, Elishar and Crouching Tuna, the streamer. They're super duper wholesome and they're going to make it a blast. We're not going insanely hard or anything like that. We're not going to have a trader or anything like that. We're all just blasting some content and trying to have some good times and make some really awesome builds. So we're not trying to stack up 20,000 mirrors or anything like that. So yeah, super duper cool. All right, moving on. What is the strat? Well, my strategy, as I've mentioned in past videos, is to push Atlas as fast and hard as possible. I want to get to the bosses and I want to be killing most of them on day one. I currently am aiming to kill Uberelder on day one, in the first, 10 or 20 hours. Well, not 10, but, probably like 20 hours. That's my goal, and then continually slay him over and over again for big currency gains. In addition to that, I'm also going to do some Guardians and their invitations and, farm some Shaper as well. But I imagine a lot of my currency is actually going to come from selling bases. Early on, if you're some of the first to the high tier maps in Atlas, you're going to have all of the high tier bases which you can sell to crafters. Stuff like Stygian Vices, Profane Ones, Hubris helmets and stuff like that. There's going to be a big demand for them, and they can be up to 5 to 20 chaos per item, just for a white item, which drop plenty per map. So pretty awesome there. So that's the kind of strat. Big boss push, big base selling, super duper awesome. And if you're interested in following a similar strategy, I did put out a video on how to make money pretty much guaranteed. Bossing is always lucrative and will always be lucrative. And of course, if you're trying to push your Atlas fast, you can also check out my my Atlas progression video, which shows you how to push Atlas using the leapfrog strategy, which is what I'm going to be using personally tomorrow, which is going to be pretty exciting. All right, let's get into the build then, shall we? So I've tried a lot of different league starts. After the nerfs, let's just some things. I wanted to really open my mind to what was possible. I tried mines. I wasn't a big fan of the playstyle, although they are very powerful. I tried skeletons, which are one of the best boss killers by far, with the lowest amount of currency invested, but their clear just wasn't impressive to me, and I really do need to be able to clear maps fairly quickly. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to farm my own Guardian maps, and I'm certainly not going to be able to accumulate any bases which I can sell to those crafters. So I had to find a build that had pretty good clear, pretty good bossing, and also was affordable and did very well with a shoestring budget. So this is the criteria, and what I came up with was Totems. So Totems with a bit of a twist, and we'll get into that twist now as I die to Uberelder. So what you're seeing in the background here is, of course, my day one simulation. It does pay to test your build on standard, and that's what I'm doing in the background here. I've got a pretty accurate representation, I think, of the kind of power level that my character should be at on day one. It's not going to be piece for piece on the gear, but I do think this is about how powerful my character will be on day one. So I do believe I'm going to be able to do Uberelder fairly effectively, and in this run we actually take him down only using one portal, which is super awesome and really, really good for the amount I invested in this kind of setup, which is nice. All right, let's get into the build itself. We do go on to take him down, which is pretty awesome, and we get our loot. But let's get into the actual build, because that's what you guys are probably here for. Here is the build. I'm going to go into kind of like how it works, kind of where the damage spikes are, and how you would level it and stuff like that, and I think that's going to pay dividends. So if you're interested in the build, let's get into it. So the main part of the build is the Soul Mantle chest piece. This is an incredibly cheap unique, and as you can see by looking at last league's information, on day 0, it's worth 1C. So this is a very common item, and that actually makes it very accessible. Of course, you can access it day 1, but part of a unique being super duper common means that it has a very high chance to drop 6 linked from a slew of league mechanics, stuff like Legion, Heist, and all sorts of other things. I think Delve can do it too. Drop really common uniques as 6 links. I'm sure some of you guys watching have got them. And Soul Mantle is one of the most common uniques from that kind of drop. So 6 link Soul Mantles should be available on day 0 and day 1 and 2 and all sorts of stuff like that. And they should be around the ballpark of 2 to 3 exalts. So getting a 6 link Soul Mantle is definitely not out of the question. Of course, I'm not going to rock up in T1 maps in a 6 link Soul Mantle. My goal will be to get a 4 link Soul Mantle Mantle as soon as possible, swap over to Totems from my leveling setup, and then also try and work towards the 5-link setup using a Jeweler's Touch on my Soul Mantle, which will take me into a territory where I have enough links set up to do Shaper and Uber Elder, which is actually incredibly powerful. Alright, so what does Soul Mantle do? Why have I been talking about it so much, and why is it so important? So totem builds revolve around putting totems down in the map, and you know, these totems basically fire whatever the setup is in the links. Now the downside of using totems is that the support gem for totems is a support gem. You have to use it. So you're basically rocking a 5-link because you're a totem build. The cool thing about Soul Mantle is though, it has spell totem built into it. So it gives you an effective 7-link totem setup, which is already very, very powerful. On top of this, it actually gives you +1 totem as well. So right now I have 4 base totems, you can see them here. And I get them, you have 1 totem base, you get an additional one from being a Hierophant, which is my ascendancy of choice because it's the totem ascendancy. You kind of have to go to the totem ascendancy if you're pulling totems. You get +1 from there, so we're at 3. And then you get your 4th one from Ancestral Bond, which is on the tree. So you get 4 totems, which is pretty cool. So you can take whatever your tooltip is and times it by 4 in PoB, which is pretty awesome. I'm a pretty big fan of that. In addition to that, the Hierophant choice also gives you a lot of defense and you know, tankiness, and it also gives you a ton of regeneration based on how many totems you have down, which is really, really big quality of life when you're doing bosses. If you take a hit, you can kind of regenerate all of it just by being a Hierophant, which I'm a big fan of. Very, very good there. Big fan. Pretty cool there. All right, so let's get a little bit more into Soul Mantle though. So we get a free spell link, and we also get +1 totems, which is, you know, a more damage multiplier if you look at it that way. But it comes with a downside. So Soul Mantle actually curses you whenever one of your totems die. So you can see here, if I just spam them, look at all these curses I'm getting on me. This is bad news. If you don't have a way to mitigate this or deal with this completely, then you're basically going to turn your character into a big fat brick because it's going to have so many curses on it, it won't be able to move, it'll get one hit by everything, and you know, it'll do no damage because curses are pretty insane. So what we have to do is counteract those curses. Enter Kikazaru. So Kikazaru is a 1 alchemy ring on day 1, and you know, you just grab 2 of these and they give you a total of 80% reduced effect of curses on you. Coupled with the node on the tree, Sanctum of Thought, you have 100% reduced effect of curses on you from the Soul Mantle mechanic, which is pretty awesome. It means these curses don't affect you at all. You can see that my resistances are intact despite having all these curses on me. Now, this won't protect you in maps completely, but for the most part, you shouldn't need to worry about curses on this build, and it's pretty awesome. Okay, cool. So how do we scale our damage then? Well, because we have so many curses on us from the downside of Soul Mantle, well, you actually get to use a gem called Self-Flagellation, which gives you increased damage per curse on you. This goes up to 20%, and you can see that we have an absolute ton of curses on us. So, you know, 20% damage per curse on you is an absolute ton of damage, which is pretty cool. You're limited to 1 of these, but it's a massive power spike for your build, and if you can pick one up early after you transition to Soul Mantle, you're going to be in really, really good shape, and it's going to really, really carry you through those first few acts. So not first few acts, first few map tiers, because it's going to really juice up your damage. Pretty awesome there. Let's get into the rest of the build. What about this gem swap? I said I was Freezing Pulse, Ice Spear totems. Well, you use Freezing Pulse for clearing maps, it's very, very effective, and then you use Ice Spear for doing bosses like you saw me doing that Uber Elder. Essentially, the only time you actually swap off Freezing Pulse though, is when you're doing a really big boss. So any of the invitations, you know, any of like Shaper, Elder, Uber Elder, all that stuff like that. And maybe if you're doing Guardians, like, you know, Phoenix or something like that, when you get to the boss, you might want to swap from Freezing Pulse over to the Ice Spear. Now, you don't have to worry too much about that. It's literally a 1 gem swap. It's pretty quick, and I don't mind it at all, even being someone who's a little bit annoyed by stuff like that. The reason you're able to do this is because you gain a similar amount of projectiles through like a hybrid setup as you would with like with the Threshold Jewels. So Freezing Pulse generally fires 1 projectile unless you support it with GMP or something like that, but you can actually get additional projectiles by using the first Snow Cluster Jewel, sorry, not Cluster Jewel, first Threshold Jewel. This comes from the story. You can get these pretty quickly. Before you need to go to Ice Spear, you want to be rocking 2 of these, so 2 first snows over here and over here. But when you start using Ice Spear and you're no longer getting enough damage from Freezing Pulse, replace one of your first snows with Rain of Splinters, giving you the same effect for the most part, but also giving you massive damage to your Ice Spear. So both of these abilities scale off of projectiles differently. So Freezing Pulse is going to get more AoE based on how many projectiles you have, and then Ice Spear is going to get more single target based on how many projectiles you have. And because you have the Rain of Splinters, you get 2 for free, and then you get another 2 for the clear from the first Snow Jewel. So you're going to have really good clear, and you're going to have really good single target, all with the swap of just 1 gem, which is pretty awesome. So I'll kind of show you guys what it looks like if we just jump up here. This is going to be the Ice Spear. So this is just 1 totem. Of course, you can put down 4. Which is pretty cool. And then if we swap over to Freezing Pulse, you know, it looks pretty cool as well. You get to throw out a bunch of projectiles. Of course, I am using a Dying Sun here. You won't have that. But, you know, if we take that off, you know, as well, it's like whatever. It's still pretty cool and pretty nice clear. If we just go down here, we can, you know, clear some more of this map. This is with a level 18 Freezing Pulse and a very high tier map. You know, with like pretty okay day 1 gear. It's nothing to write home about. So it's pretty awesome. I'm a big fan of the play style, and it has pretty good clear speed. When you're on a 6 link, which we're not currently on right now, it's even better clear speed because you summon 2 totems at once, but we'll get into that as that's a little bit more of an advanced mechanic. But basically, if I had to rate it overall, if we're talking maximums here, like a mana miner is a 5 at boss killing, I'd probably rank totems at full build, and also early on at about a 4 out of 5 in terms of power against bosses. In terms of its clear, if Blade Vortex with an explosion chest like Impulsor is a 5, I'd probably rate Freezing Pulse totems as about a 3 out of 5. So it's got pretty damn good clear, and it's also got really good bossing, and it's very cheap. As I talked about with Soul Mantle earlier, that's pretty much the only unique you really need. Then you just need to source your Cluster Jewel and your gems, and maybe a few good rares, and you're pretty much online. We'll get into that when we get to the PoBs though. Alright, so let's talk a little bit more about these totems, shall we? What are we supporting it with? Well, generally you just want to put in whatever gives you the most damage in PoB. You will always chill your enemies, so Hypothermia is extremely effective. I'd recommend always using this, and you can expect your enemy to always be chill. Now there is a few other things you guys need to know about the mechanics here. So Ice Spear itself does have a few really important things you need to know. So when using Ice Spear, you want to try and place it at the maximum range possible, because it actually has 2 different stages that it goes through. Let's see if I can demonstrate it here. So when you shoot an Ice Spear out, see how it kind of arms? It has that big chunky one, and then it becomes a bullet. You want it in its bullet form. In its bullet form, it has significantly increased critical strike, and it has like way more projectile speed and all sorts of stuff like that. 600% increased critical strike. That is no joke at all. So you want to try and place your totems at the maximum range you can around a boss, and you're going to notice a massive increase in your damage. Most likely, it's going to have close to 100% crit chance if you can get the projectiles to hit in their second form and not their first form. So you need to remember that when you're using Ice Spear. Now, Freezing Pulse is actually the opposite. Freezing Pulse deals additional damage to enemies which are closer to them. So you want to put your totems close to the enemies when you're clearing monsters. I like to kind of just throw a totem out wherever I'm moving to, and that seems to work pretty good for me. I'm a big fan of that kind of play style, and it helps me clear really quickly. So we kind of go in here, we can kind of like clear really quickly. It's pretty nice. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So this is a T16 map even, and we're on a 5 link, and now we're missing a flask. So it's a pretty damn good build. I'm a pretty big fan of it, and I think it's one of the best league starters you could go for. Let's get out of here though. All right, so now we talked about how we had 4 totems. The 6th link will be a flex pick, but I recommend going for multiple totems. So multiple totems essentially makes it so that you summon 6 totems instead of 4, but it does come with a less damage multiplier on top of not giving you a more damage multiplier. So it does actually give you a net neutral damage gain when you actually calculate it all out, but it gives you massive quality of life. So if you're looking for massive single target damage, you actually wouldn't use this as your 6th link, but if you're looking for really good clear on maps, it essentially doubles the damage of your totems that you put down in each iteration, because it makes it put 2 totems down instead of 1, and it lets you get to full damage much quicker, because you get way more curses way faster, and also you get all your totems down faster. But if you're going for pure damage, you'd use a different 6th link, but multiple totems is pretty quality of life, and I'm a big fan of it. Alright, so we've talked about the Ascendancy, we've talked about the main gear. The rest of this gear is just rares with good stats for my build on it. Nothing is too insane here. Crit multi, crit, and added cold skill levels is your main priority. You can get some flat damage where possible, but you're a crit based build, so that's what you're looking at. Just follow the items in the PoB, which I'll be showing off in a minute here, and that will set you up pretty well. So this character is kind of scuffed, but you kind of get the point here. We are using a 1 cluster jewel setup. This is just a coil damage cluster jewel. I don't have any notables on it because I wanted to simulate a league start, but the cluster jewels that are really important here are the mediums. So totems are a fairly underrepresented class. Not many people play totems at all. So totem cluster jewels are fairly cheap, and you should be able to get ones which you want. So these aren't necessarily the best possible damage cluster jewels you can get, but I wanted ones which really good quality of life. So I went with ones which had, placement speed, damage, range, all sorts of stuff like that. So definitely not the maximum damage you can get, but I like the quality of life, so I went with these. Damage is definitely not an issue, which you'll see when we get to the PoB. And even from that Uber kill, you can see that we just have, quality of life setups here on the 6th link. This is basically the gear I did it in, and it was pretty easy. And you could do it with even less damage, no problem. Very easy to do on day 1, so super duper awesome there. Outside of that, I don't think there's really anything else which is too noteworthy on the tree here. It's fairly standard. Apart from the two jewels there, that's pretty much it for the skill tree. All right, so I've kind of explained how the build works. You want to try and keep all of your totems down at once. You want to try and keep as many curses on yourself as possible. You always want to be putting totems down, so never stop doing this. Don't put like totems down and then run away and try and let them fire. Always just be putting totems down. That is the strategy. Let's talk a little bit about our curse setup and also our exposure setup. So in terms of applying exposure to enemies, I'm using an Arcanist brand setup. You absolutely need to be using this all of the time. It adds a massive amount of damage, an absolutely phenomenal amount of damage. You always need to make sure that if there's a target that is not dying and it has high health, so whether that's a boss or a rare or anything like that, you need to have Arcanist brand on them, and that's going to apply a curse to them in the form of I think it's called projectile weakness, sniper's mark, sorry. And it's also going to apply a frost bomb on the floor constantly. So if you're constantly spamming the brand, you'll constantly get frost bomb, and it'll constantly be giving you exposure. So it's probably about 40 to 50% more damage from keeping an Arcanist brand on the boss, and you absolutely need to be doing it. So I'll go over the links in the PoB, but that's generally how you play the character. It's a very effective mapper and also bosser, and it's kind of a hybrid setup, and it requires not much gear at all. You can pick up res off the floor if you need to, but good wands, really good crit multi, and obviously a 6 link is going to take you most of the way there, and it's pretty effective. Let's get into the PoBs. All right, let me pull these up here. All right, so this is my low gear PoB. I do have a few additional gem links in here that I'm going to use when I really get into min-maxing. This is a hybrid PoB, so you can swap between full and minimum gear. That's why there's a few gems which aren't being used, but we'll get into them in a second here. So you can see here is my setup. It's all level 20 gems. And we have about 6.5 million DPS, assuming that all of the spears hit in their second form. Remember, that's the form that's at max range, so that there is a bit of managing there to make sure that happens. It is also with Aziri's Promise up, and also with my brand up, my Arcanist brand on there. So you do have to have all those things up to hit the 6.5 mil, and also a percentage of the spears will miss. That is just a fact of life, but maybe we lose 30% of our damage because they miss. We still have a lot of damage. Make sure you're always keeping your totems alive and putting them in advantageous positions, and you'll probably get pretty close to that 6.5 mil. Pretty awesome there. I want to kind of demonstrate that the real 6th link is quality of life, so I'm going to take off multiple totems and swap our totems down to 4, and you can see that our damage is fairly similar. It does go down by a bit, but of course it's nothing to be concerned about. You can achieve a similar result that you saw in that Uber on a 5 link to a 6 link, which is pretty cool. All right, let's move on to the items. So for your basic starter build, all you're looking for on your ones is cast speed, crit, and cold damage ones. And then you got just life res on the helmet. You got your soul mantle, which is really important. Life res dex on the gloves. Life res movement speed on the boots. You want the crit and crit multi, and some life and maybe a bit of res on the amulet, and you're going to anoint Marked for Death. Marked for Death essentially means when you mark an enemy with your Arcanist brand, it is going to be eligible to be culled, which means that it'll die at 10% life. This is an absolutely massive damage increase, and you need to be doing it. This anointment is incredibly cheap. I think it's like 2 green oils and like a black oil, maybe not even a black oil actually, but it's basically doable day 1 for everybody. Kikazaru's for the curse reduction, and we also have a Stygian Vice here with a crit multi, and a cold damage jewel. pretty good there. Some real basic flasks, nothing to write home about there. And we got our cluster jewel. You guys can take a look at all that stuff like that and stuff we've already talked about. All right, so that's the kind of overall build. Let's get into the other thing that I added here, which is an Arcane Cloak, Arcane Surge setup. Arcane Cloak is definitely something you can go towards on this build because you are actually a mind over matter Hierophant build. So you scale mana reasonably well. So you have 2,181 mana. That's going to turn into mitigation for you, but also damage at some points in time. This damage is not included in the PoB, but you could easily include that. So it probably is about 1,200 mana. And then that would actually affect the DPS as well. So you can see that that is actually a factor, but I'm not including that for, consistency's sake. This is going to give you increased damage. You're going to put this on your left click, so it's always on you whenever you have it, and it's going to do really, really well there. Alternatively, if you need more defense, you can also anoint Dynamo on your amulet instead of the March for Death, if you need more survivability and not more damage. It is worth pointing out, though, that this is a squishy kind of glass cannon build. It does have about 10k EHP overall, but that is on the squishy side when you consider everything said and done. So yeah, pretty squishy. But if you know what you're doing, you know where to move and place your totems, it is absolutely a very, very good starter. All right, moving on. Let's talk about what the full build looks like. This build setup, which I've shown you guys here, is intended for day one. It is absolutely not the full build, and its potential exceeds this greatly. All right, let's swap over to the full build. In order to check the full build out on my PoB, all you need to do is come over here and go from low gear to finished gear. And then all you need to do is come over here and go from low gear to high gear. And there you have it. So it'll start showing a higher DPS number. Then you're going to need to activate, are you always on low life? Yes, if it's not already activated. And then I believe that there was one other thing. Oh, hatred. You're going to need to turn hatred on as well in the options here. I'll turn it down to 20. So this is basically using all 20 gems, no awakened gems, no quality, anything like that. And it has 25 million DPS. If you put on the awakened gems, it goes way up. You go up to about 44 million DPS with everything said and done at like 2120s, and it's super duper awesome. But 25 million is more than enough to do every single piece of content in the game. Let's go over what I changed to get it to maximum gear. So you're going to be using some rare profane wands with much better stats. You can see what we have here. It's not the best things you get, but it's pretty good. You're going to be using Verdi's Veil. Remember how Soul Mantle curses you? Well, Verdi's Veil, a helmet from Maven, actually makes you unaffected by curses. So you now don't need to use those Kick His Arrows or the note on the tree to bypass the effect of having that, those curses on you. You can just use this helmet, which traditionally is about 1C off of Maven. It may be more expensive this league, I'm not sure, but it's very, very cheap and very accessible. It's about a 30 to 40% chance drop off of Maven herself. So I do expect these to come popping up on day 2 or 3. And this is going to make it so that you have your ring slots open and also more points on the tree. Very, very powerful there. And I've also got the Ice Spear Fire's initial projectile enchant on there. That's a massive damage boost. If you can get it, get it. If not, oh well. Next up, we still have our Soul Mantle. Nothing new there. I think we have the same gloves, but I upgraded the boots to have Chaos Res on them as well as be two-toned. Pretty awesome. We're using Pandemonious now instead of just a red Crimolti amulet, and we've got March for Death on there still. Again, you can anoint Dynamo if you need more survivability instead of damage. We got an Essence Worm in here to make sure that we retain our mana instead of reserving it. The reason we want to do that is because we're a mind over matter build, and 40% of the damage we take gets taken away from our mana instead. So we actually have a lot more tankiness than it actually shows. So we don't want to sacrifice that, so we use an Essence Worm and we put our Hatred in there. Very good there. Now, in order to activate the bonuses of Hexproof from Verdi's Veil, you need to actually use a blue ring. So here I'm using a Vermilion ring with Chaos Res on it. I think this is a pretty good choice, but you can put whatever you want in here to get that curse immune. Very nice there. In addition to that, because we're curse immune, we can actually use Coward's Legacy. It's a belt that gives you low life for basically no extra cost. It basically gives you a 30% more damage multiplier, and that's pretty awesome because you're immune to curses because of Verdi's Veil. Very, very nice multiplier there. I don't know how available this will be on day 1 or 2 or whatever, but failing that, you can also use the Brutal Charges belt from Maven. It's not as good, but it's not too bad. Following that, just stick with your Stygian Vice from earlier. We do have a Bottle of Faith in here, although because you have so much damn crit from second form of Ice Spear, it's actually not that insane. You're probably better off using a Wise Oak with Cold Pen, honestly, and that'll bring the cost of the build down significantly. Yeah, it's really not that impressive. I mean, it's pretty good actually, but you know, it is what it is. You don't need it, but it is good. And then we're also added in a Dying Sun because we're a projectile-based build. This is going to be pretty cheap, I'd say, after week 1. But you know, before that, it might be pretty pricey. But you know, if you can get your hands on it, it's going to be massive damage burst, and that's going to be really good. Everything else is the same. We did put in I think we have a Watcher's Eye in here, do we? Let me swap over the tree here. Do we actually? I thought I had a Watcher's Eye in here. Well, all right. We don't have a Watcher's Eye. Just the build just got that much cheaper. If I was to put a Watcher's Eye in there, I'd use a cold penetration and flat cold damage Watcher's Eye. I did have that in here, but apparently it's disappeared, so unfortunate. But yeah, you can throw that in there as well, guys. Obviously, you don't need it with that much damage. You know, in the background, I probably had about 4 million damage when I was doing that Uber roller, and this is 25 million damage, so it's 5 times the damage. So you're gonna kill things pretty much instantly, which is pretty awesome. You know, pretty much insta phase most of the content in the game, which is essentially exactly what you want. Very awesome indeed. One quick note though is in your Arcanist brand, if you're using the Bottled Faith, you will want to actually swap out Spell Cascade, which I have here, for Purifying Flame, so that you can maintain the Bottled Faith, Consecrated Ground on the enemy at all times, and that won't really change too much there, but you know, that's just definitely a bit of a tip there for you guys. Also worth noting, this build has 4 open gem sockets on top of using Cast on Death Portal and Portal. So options to go in here are pretty much Cast on Damage Taken setup if you want to put something in there like that. And you can also use the Sigil of Power if you're happy to stand in the sigil. You can get even more damage using that, which is pretty cool. But you know, pretty much anything you want in here. You can level gems for more money per hour. It's definitely a bit of a flex spot, and I think it's pretty cool to have that. So yeah, that's pretty much the build overall, guys. I'm gonna roll some more footage of, you know, the build slaying some mobs. We'll do Shaper run on a 5-link. Let's just get into that. This is Shaper, and I kind of want to give you some closing thoughts and tell you guys how I'm going to level the build. So overall, I don't have the gear progression section that I normally have, which I really like to give you guys, but let me give you a rundown of my plan on how I'm going to get from A to B. So I'm going to rock up on Twilight Strand, and my plan is to start as Stormblast Mines with a Orb of Storms, the kind of traditional speed leveling, and then I'm going to go into Armageddon Brand with Cremation in Act 4 once I get access to Armageddon Brand, and I'm going to maintain playing an Armageddon Brand build until I get my 4-link Soul Mantle. And we went over why that's so powerful. Once I get that, I'm going to swap over to Totems. All throughout that though, I am going to take Hierophant Nodes to save myself on regrets, because you know, I don't want to spend like 100 regrets at the end. But yeah, it shouldn't be too bad. The leveling as brands is incredibly powerful. You can also stay as brands even early into maps like, you know, T3, 4, 5 maps, which is pretty good. But yeah, that's going to be my plan. If you want more information on how I plan to level, I'm basically following a speed run done by Quantric. He's a pretty awesome content creator. Definitely go check out that video if you're planning to play the build, and that is going to be in the description. It's basically word for word. I'm going to do exactly as he says, but I'm also going to change the tree a little bit. And I'm going to be a Hierophant instead. I think it's going to be more than fine. You know, that's my league start plans, guys. Hope you guys have enjoyed the video and it gives you a bit of insight. I guess just on that note, this wasn't a guide. You know, things may be a little bit off. I may need to correct some things. But if you're a savvy player and you understand what a good day 1 build looks like, you'll recognize that Ice Spear Totems is actually completely insane. And the clear for a build that tunes bosses so effectively is in fact top tier. And with the shoestring budget, I fully recommend doing this if you're you're looking at a cheap starter to get through all the content. And with that said, hopefully you guys have enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys at League Start live on Twitch TV. You better not miss it. And until then, cheers. I'll answer questions down in the comments before League Start. Until then, I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.